Hey everybody, it's me, the Einstein of Wall Street from the balcony here at the New York Stock Exchange. Breaking news, forget about it, unbelievable. These are wild times, extraordinary times, call for extraordinary measures. So much going on today. How lucky am I that I have Dan Ives here with me? This is just like, tell me, breaking news. He just flew in on this, it's like you remember the Jetsons? Dan, actually, I looked out the window here in the balcony and I saw something flying through the air, and I looked and it was Dan on one of those George Jetson little maneuvering machines. He flew, actually parked it right out here. It's the first one on Earth. He got out and he just came through the door here in the balcony.
It's crazy.
Boom!
It was called Air Tuchman.
Air Tuchman. It's a new company.
They serve caviar and champagne.
Exactly. Tell me, breaking news. What happened today?
I mean, look. So let's just take a step back.
Okay,
that me and you've talked about for last few weeks. Musk with Doge had to. This was on a fork in the road path. He had to basically choose CEO of Tesla or ultimately staying with Doge. Okay. And I think what came out today, first you had delivery numbers for Tesla that were disaster.
Okay,
I mean,
when did that come out?
It came out early this morning.
Oh, really?
Look, no rose-colored glasses, disaster.
So straight up earnings this morning, or
straight
just
up deliveries that were very, very soft. Okay. And again, 30-40% of that reason is the brand destruction that Musk has created.
Correct.
And then Politico is just reporting, in the last hour, that Doge, it looks like Trump is telling confidence that Musk is going to take a step back. I still believe we'll be involved in some form of Doge, but clearly he's taking a big step back and will focus more on Tesla. And my whole point is, this had to happen now. If it continued,
destruction of the brand.
A brand crisis tornado.
Yes.
The longer that continued, past the point.
Right.
And I think Musk even recognized this is taking on a life of its own.
Right.
And I think this is, we got to see as news come down clearly, the tariff. There's a lot of moving parts.
Okay,
tariff, TikTok, everything else. But I don't think it's coincidental that this news is coming
today.
Yeah.
All right, so let's bring it back for a minute. We are here on, what day is today? We're here on April 2nd. Okay, this is being called the Day of Liberation. For those who have been liberated from bad situations, I think it's a little bit disrespectful, but whatever. Let's bring it back to where we are here today. February 19th, the markets were trading at record highs. We've now seen over the last 6 weeks, this market spiral down to a level that was basically, we'd gone from bullish market to correction mode. Stocks actually went from, from trading at record highs across the board. Not everything at 52-week highs, clearly, on February 19th, but the market was in solid bullish territory, and basically, single-handedly in a way, look, he's the new sheriff in town, no disrespect, sir, no problem at all. However, historically, on the floor of the stock exchange and in finance, right, there's certain standards that we sort of follow. Historically, if you go back to the Bernanke days, right, when there was news that was disseminated that was going to have clear, strong economic effect on economic, when news was disseminated that was going to have effect on global economic standards and situations, right, that information was released before the market opened or after the market closed or at a designated news conference, so that the playing field was even and everybody had a chance to react to it in a certain way. Mr. Trump doesn't play on that field. So what ended up happening was, and we've talked about this before, what ended up happening was the way that he was disseminating information is the way that he does things. And I said, once again, no disrespect, it was a matter of when he felt it, when he wanted to say it, he said it. Whether it was the middle of the night, on a tweet, in a news conference, it didn't really matter, outside the Rose Garden. And there was nothing rosy about it. So basically what happened was we had information being disseminated about the friend. It goes back to, I believe it was probably February 20 or 21st, the first day that he said, I am imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico. It's going to be 25%, right? Market sold off 70 handles, an aggressive move. It happened over 4 minutes. And then almost instantly, he was backtracking. He was pulling back. There was a little bit of a bipolar, passive-aggressive approach at trying to get out information. It was lack of clarity and dissemination of information in sort of an irresponsible way at best. And so he can do what he wants. He's the new sheriff in town. However, what markets couldn't handle after about 2 weeks of this which was a push and pull, tugging, there was no clarity, no decisiveness about if you had come in and said, you know what, I'm not really clear about everything, but we're going to have tariffs, this is who's going to be affected, friend and foe. The market can handle anything. We've seen that. It can handle anything. Wars, pandemics, whatever. But when the information is trickles out in a way that's a little bit indecisive and a lack of clarity, the market can't handle it. And what ends up happening is a lot of lack of confidence in the market. And we've seen that happen. So over the last 6 weeks, the market has broken down quite aggressively, down 10, 20, almost 30% on certain levels. The indices themselves in correction mode. And so all eyes were that. So what's significant to me, and I'm going to let you talk in a second, was last Friday,
this is a great build up to everything.
Exactly. A week ago Friday, okay, when we had a couple of days where there was not as much aggressive narrative about tariffs, we got a little bit of a reprieve from it. The market immediately, and it was also a short-term technical level where we were finding support. Right, buyers came in. Last Friday, we were up 1,000 points. That gave me a sign that, you know what, there are buyers in the wings. There is what in the old terminology, there was a bid in the market. We saw that Friday and a little bit carry over into Monday. Then we saw this past weekend, the Monday of last week, we saw the market go up 1,000 points on Monday because over the weekend we got nice clarity, the beginning of clarity where it came out of the Oval Office that we were going to have pinpointed and a softer approach to the tariff game and that we were not going to carry that sort of aggressive negative tone that we had. Market immediately loved that and we rallied 1,000 points. Then we had a little confidence number that was disappointing. We had the Fed come out on Fed Day and they said, our belief, my belief, I'm speaking for Jay Powell, his belief was that he thought everyone was overreacting to the tariff situation. It wasn't going to be as bad as we thought. And if it was going to be bad, he believed most of it was baked into the market already. Meaning that the sell-off we just experienced was about where it was going to be. It was already locked in. The market loved that, and we actually rallied 1,000 points, 97 handles to be exact on that Wednesday. That started the momentum to turn in the market. All right, leaving us with all eyes being on today, April, I can't believe it's April 2nd, the day of liberation, where Mr. Trump was going to call a news conference at 4 p.m. and lay out the law on tariffs, who, where, what, how much, and the whole plan was going to be laid out. From my point of view is what I've seen as a broker here on the floor. On Friday, we started the triple witch, quad witch, right? Serious volume coming into the market. Dollars being deployed into this market. It started to feel like a turnaround. On Monday, the last day of the quarter, okay, and you don't know this, but on Monday, the last day of the quarter and the last day of the month, we had the largest imbalance in history of dollars coming into the market on the close. $14.6 billion imbalance at 3:50 at 4 o'clock at 3:50 on Monday. Ever. Wow. 10 billion in the S&P and 14.6 billion in S&P NASDAQ together. That is serious money coming into the market, and I believe that was money being allocated. It wasn't a short cover. It wasn't window dressing for the end of the quarter. I believe it was money being put into the market, okay? And that was significant. When you see intraday reversals, to me, that's a good sign that things are starting to turn. So you are so generous to come and hang out with me today.
Well, first of all, I thought, like the way that you just summarized that, tear to my eye. No, because that's exactly brings you to where we are today.
Exactly.
And I just fundamentally think the administration behind the scenes over the last 48, 72 hours has basically realized, got to take a little step back. Like I think you're going to see maybe a softer tone in terms of because the reality is a U.S. car with U.S. parts is a Pinocchio fictional tale. The average U.S. car company that makes cars in the U.S. gets 40% of their parts from international.
Correct.
So to say that you're going to tax 25%, the average car price will go up $5,000-$10,000 for U.S. consumers.
For U.S. cars.
And at the end of the day,
we saw that with Ford and GM.
Tariffs, Reagan's talked about it, anyone else, tariffs are basically a tax on consumers. There's no really debate.
Correct.
So I think now the big question is, how do they handle China in terms of the market? Europe, probably a harsher sort of tone because of VAT and some others.
Right.
China, it's probably a little kid gloves. That's sort of my view.
Okay.
That'll be very bullish in terms of that, in terms of on the China
Our tone with China.
because ultimately, China holds the keys when it comes to
Yeah, they do hold the
semis,
keys.
chips, this.
Correct.
TikTok, another chip on the table.
Right.
I believe TikTok deal probably happens in the next 24 hours, and that's going to be one where it's like ByteDance could keep the algorithm.
Right.
That's a little plain nice in the sandbox.
Right.
Oracle and some other investors probably get the ownership.
Right.
TikTok doesn't get banned. China is like, okay, I
We're
appreciate
playing
that.
nice.
The way.
We're starting to play nice.
And I think the levels are basically 15 to 20%. Any sort of 15 to 20% number universal
Right.
would be viewed probably net bullish from a reciprocal.
Really?
20% is where I think is priced in.
Okay.
Over 20% and harsher, market sells off. So
What
I
is
think
a reciprocal tariff?
reciprocal basically means like you tax me,
I'm taxing you.
But if you tax me at 40%, I'm going to be the nice person and I'll still tax you only at
20%.
15, 20%. So I think this is all some of the nuances. And then the big question is, what do the off-ramps look like?
Right.
Is it kind of like, okay, all of a sudden like, Vietnam, they signed no longer, I won. So it's like, it's trying to understand like what the off-ramps are in terms
Right.
of getting deals done,
Right.
negotiations. That's going to be some of the keys to kind of read in between the lines, you know, when we see this today.
So I'm always looking, what was the motivation behind the way the last 6 weeks have evolved
I think
unpack? Do you think it was all about bringing people to the negotiating table with net? My goal was to make a deal, and that's the way I do it?
And let's call it like it is. They overplayed their hand.
They did. Yeah,
I mean, there's no
question about it.
They thought China would be like, oh, where do I go? Who do I call? Mexico, there. EU be like, oh my. Instead,
Right.
they're like,
Right.
we're gonna. And I think they overplayed their hand.
Okay.
The market spoke. Markets are not Republican or Democrat.
No, they're not.
Market, as you always say, like markets speak to what's truly happening.
Correct.
Trump watches the market every minute.
Of course.
And I think the reality is they recognize if you have a misstep here, you go into any sort of recession, you lose the midterms, the presidency's over.
Correct.
Democrats win it. Last 2 years, it's basically, you know, a stalemate presidency. Trump's done. J.D. Vance probably done.
And look what happened. Like, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
so I'm just saying, I think they recognize you can play with these third rail issues so haphazardly.
Right.
What happens if I press this button?
Right. So I think maybe they underestimated the intelligence of the investment community.
I agree.
Right, and I think that there were some people got scared, people sold stocks. We always know that, you know what, when markets are going down, it's the time to buy, not a time to sell. So those who were selling, I mean, it started to look like we were really starting to break down. Right, and so I can't identify who was selling and who was not.
But then where the money was going, Europe has been a double-digit outperformer.
Right.
You've seen global money go to China. So the other thing is, I think they're very well aware, money's not just going to bonds. and gold.
Right, exactly. It's going out of the country.
And
so
that
we've completely defeated our I mean, we're doing this despite our face.
It's
right,
like-
you're
it's
cutting
like-
off our nose despite our
it's
face.
like me intentionally stabbing myself with an envelope opener for no reason.
Yeah. See that? So amazing. So you know what? I may have set the stage, but you just unpacked the story and made sense of it.
But I
Because
think
that's really hard.
I think that's and I think today, Trump's going to be like, we're doing the, however they
It's
from a
going to be a
grandstanding.
real raw speech.
But it's going to be a little more like, but we're, and there's going to be nuances in there where you're
Right.
like, okay, this is negotiation. I think you have a lot of countries, they'll probably come out being like, we're coming at you. Behind the scenes, they're trying to get deals
They're
done.
making nice. Okay, so
And Vietnam and Israel just dropped tariffs this morning.
really.
So that's the first.
How much they dropped the amount?
So they basically took off their tariffs for
Really?
the U.S. So now, if you look, Israel and Vietnam did it.
Wow.
It's showing.
Okay.
And also Canada basically said they're willing to negotiate. So those
Okay,
are.
so look, you look at what could have been Mr. Trump's motivation at playing in the playground this way. You know what? I think he was posturing. saying I'm the new sheriff in town and I want everybody to pay their way, and I don't think that's been going on. So he's really made it clear, who's in charge now, and that he did not like the way things were happening up till this point, and so this is the way it's going to be. Okay, fine. It's a new IPO, SMA storage company, opening around $33 today here on the floor. The IPOs are still happening. So,
yeah, we're CoreWeave, Newsmax.
Newsmax, ladies and gentlemen, that stock came out. Now you're going to realize the Newsmax IPO has never been done before. So we have regular IPOs, we have SPACs. Okay, a SPAC is a shell company that you open a stock underneath it, inside of this shell company at $10. There is a banker, there are certain standards around it, but it's different than a normal IPO. Then you have what's called a direct listing. Shopify or Spotify was a direct listing. It was done without a banker.
Direct listing.
Right, so there are different standards around how those stocks open. The thing around Newsmax was completely different. It was a hybrid between an IPO, a SPAC, and a direct listing. So it was stopped at $10. So there was a limit. It had to be 7.5 million shares. It had to be priced at $10, and there was no banker. So it had these components to it that had never been happened before. A very small opening, only 180,000 shares opened on a 7.5 million share deal. It was priced at 10, opened at 14, and went as high as 200. So it's very unusual, but let's go back to what we were talking about. We're here on Day of Liberation on April 2nd, okay? The breaking news that Dan came in with is that so let's talk about Tesla, right? So Elon Musk is the CEO of Tesla. Right, he has also been hired to run Doge by Mr. Trump, as well as becoming a very insider advisor to Mr. Trump. So, the bottom line is he's been, as brilliant as he is, he's been spread really thin. And obviously, he's one of the masters who built the brand of Tesla. But if you look at it, Tesla is trading 50% lower than its high, which was just a number of months ago. And so what Dan is trying to say to us is that we started to see the ramifications and the manifestation of what happens when somebody who's as powerful as he is, who's running a company, one of the greatest disruptive brands in the world, is not getting the attention it needs, and he's being spread super thin, and people know that.
And the political
implications of siding with Mr. Trump and being under his wing or on top of his wing or whatever it is. Causing so much political implications that people are like sticking screwdrivers in people who are driving Teslas on the road. We saw how it affected the stock, and we saw how it affected everything around that brand. And so what happened was Dan came in and said that Politico is coming out with the story that he is resigning, or he's being asked to leave, or he agreed to leave to be the head of Doge. He will be involved, and he's going back to being the CEO of Tesla, and he's going to give it the attention. The baby needs attention.
Also, is the top American tech brand in the world.
Correct. Right, it is. It stands alone with like one or two companies.
And NVIDIA and
right.
The last thing you want to do is here basically permanently damage the future
right. of one of the greatest companies.
And has 80,000 U.S. employees.
Right. So we're trying to paint a picture here that, you know what, maybe the new administration and Mr. Musk may have overplayed their cards. We don't know clearly what their motivation was about that way they handled the first 6 weeks of their entry into this marketplace and into the tariff story. We do know it's a hard thing to sell.
And playing politically, Musk knows how to run companies.
Yes.
Tesla, SpaceX. Yes. When you go into the Beltway,
right,
DC is a whole nother world.
You're so right.
If you try to play it the same way,
right,
it'll blow up like a grenade in your face.
Yeah, and so that's what we're seeing. It affected the stock. It affected everything going on. And look, at the end of the day, I know that everybody wants this to work. I know, friends and foes, we want to make this economy, get it back on track. We want to make the market go back. What we've seen over the last number of days is a beautiful intraday reversals. We're seeing it now in the S&P and in the Dow. We are now in green territory. Tesla, when that news came out, people read it right away. You would think, oh my God, that would be bad news. It in fact is good news, and the stock responded by rallying beautifully. So where are we now? At 4 o'clock, Mr. Trump is going to hold a news conference at the Rose Garden, at the Oval Office, wherever it may be, and he's going to lay out the plan. Now, everyone's saying they're scared that what's going to happen on Tuesday? Is it the volatility? Is the market going to keep going down? From my experience and your experience, there's an old saying on Wall Street: when there's blood in the streets, it's when the market rallies, right? In anticipation
or
is
do you think it's like a clearing event?
It's a clearing event. So whether we understand it or not, or whether they do, once we've established, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we're doing, right? It will be, it'll just be, it's like when you did something wrong and you were afraid to tell your parents the whole story, and you just finally mea culpa and just go, Dad, Mom, I messed up. This is what was happening, and you've cleared the slate. Now we can get back to what we need to do. Whatever happens, he's going to be laying out the story. This is what we're doing. This is going to be who's affected. This is what it's going to cost. These are the people who are going to suffer and who are going to benefit from this. And this is the story. And now we can go on. When you have the war between Russia and Ukraine for a month, we didn't know what was going to happen. There was anticipation of the war. The minute that the war was declared, the market rallied 1,000 points. Yeah. That's the old premise on Wall Street. It's like buy the rumor, sell the news. Once everything is out in the streets,
like there's always the story. Like I remember, Cash and always telling me, 63 Cuban Missile Crisis. He goes upstairs and he tells one of the traders, they're saying that potentially that the missiles have flown.
Right.
And then the trader basically, the guy I work for, he's like, when the missiles are up there, that's where you buy the stock.
That's the same line. It's when there's blood in the streets, you buy the market. And so that's my hope. And it's been already setting up for a number of days. When you start to see large amounts of cash being deployed in the market. Look, the people who are running large funds and large institutions and who are really running the big whale accounts, these people are really smart, and they've got to read the room, right? Because look, at the end of the day, they're being judged on their P&L, right? At the end of the day, it's been a hard couple of for weeks for them. The last 6 weeks have been difficult. Unless you were a genius and you sold the market and went into cash the day of the inauguration, right? And then you shorted the market on February 19th, and now you're starting to cover, right? That's the genius scenario. I only know one guy who did it, my dentist. He's a friggin' genius, right? But short of, he told me that while I was sitting in the chair going, right? That's what he told me, and I said, "You're smarter than me, baby." Right? However,
and he's doing it while you
can. Right, with a root canal. And he was trying to, don't you love that when dentists start talking to you when you ever, how can I respond to the conversation?
And you can.
Anyway, I think I'm hoping, this is what I'm trying to manifest, that we're starting to see things turn around a little bit. We're starting to see the confidence come back in the market, and I'm sure we're going to see that today at 4 o'clock when finally we lay out the story. Look, think about it. We also talked about it. The tech sector has been hit badly over the last 6 weeks. You cover NVIDIA. Right? I mean, we were at a conference, a Wedbush conference a couple of weeks ago, and you were still very clear that even though it looks like nothing has fundamentally changed. Now, talk to me about chips in NVIDIA and tariffs in NVIDIA.
But there's the worrying about the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
Company X was going to spend Y.
Right.
NVIDIA chips AI. Now, based on tariffs, uncertainty, maybe they spend this much.
Right.
That's why these stocks have sold off.
Right.
The fear of that. Uncertainty, CEO confidence goes like this.
Right.
It doesn't change the long-term view of where there's all that autonomous.
It's a psychological game. Yeah.
But you need to get through this period to understand the playing field.
Okay. So you know what? Look, we are forever bulls, but we're not forever bulls without responsibly looking at it. We're not just trying to paint a beautiful picture for you. If the picture was not beautiful, and we wouldn't just hand you rose-colored glasses and just hope for the best, right? Think about what Dan just said. Yes, the market sold off. It was a function of however people interpreted the news going on, right? But has anything fundamentally changed in those stocks? They may get affected a little bit by the tariffs, but at the end of the day, even Jay Powell said that he believes a lot of that was baked in. And so hopefully the runway looks clear for going on from here. It is April 2nd. We are beginning.
And we'll be back.
We're beginning.
We'll be back after this announcement by early next week to now analyze, the implications of it.
Q2, the implications of the tariff story, who's benefit, who's going to suffer, and hopefully clear sailing going forward. Because you know what, if you go back to 2024, the first quarter was the best quarter since 2019. April was a hard month, right? Function of actually different components. It was all about, we had been promised 7 interest rates in January. By the time we got to April, we were talking about no interest rates because things were so good, right? This time we had a rough first quarter. It happens, right? We actually, January, February was not bad. We had a rough March, let's be clear. Okay, and hopefully now we are going to just clear the slate, move on to better times. April hopefully will be a super solid month. And that's all we got to say. And that's all we got to say about that. Boom.